Hello and welcome to Butter Movies. The sunk cost of these special ops. It's enough to leave a pit in your stomach as the Lioness crew boards the plane to Iran. This one's going to be spicy, Jo says, egging on her comrade's bloodlust before making a devastating last phone call to Neil. The final stretch of this mission couldn't be further from where it started, and the chances of finding any redemption in it are next to nil, even if they do win. Doesn't bode well for the future of Jo's family, nor for any spy aiming for order as the solution to all this chaos. Wouldn't you know it, the deck's been reshuffled to suit the skills of our Lioness. Their best covert option of illuminating the targets in Iran is by sending in a helicopter to strike close by, and Jo has the clearance to run the operation from the field. Byron isn't sure about letting Jo go to Iran, even if she promises not to set foot off the base, but he's swayed just enough when she lays out her real reason for being there. I can't walk away on a loss. There are just 2 episodes left this season, including this one, and we are no closer to reaching that goal than we were nearly 2 months ago. Sadly, Lioness Season 2 is only more confusing this week. As Secretary of State Morgan Freeman continues to investigate the suicide bombing at the border, CIA Deputy Director Byron Westfield, Michael Kelly, explains that he believes Iranian counterintelligence is working through a proxy, at the behest of Chinese intelligence. What? According to Westfield, their plan is to destabilize the border and influence the US elections. Plus, the CIA received information from Jordan and Mossad that 2 Chinese nuclear scientists are stationed in Hakkari, Turkey, with plans to travel to Taiwan within the week. The new threat is World War III. So after a weird speech about how George W. Bush shepherded us into the future post 9/11, it's time for Freeman and Westfield to mobilize. We're not the only country with open borders, Freeman says. Maybe it's time we reminded our adversaries of that. The mission has nuclear implications now. Cruz and Josie reach the new safe house in Fort Liberty before the rest of the team, just in time to respond to the inquiry. These two wanna fuck. Pablo Carrillo is safely in prison and headed to San Jose. The door has officially been opened on that front, even though they don't actually get to finish this episode. Given the seriousness and personal harm of the previous Lioness operation's love complications, you would think Cruz would have been able to hold her own for another one. However, spies frequently seek out opportunities for emotional and physical contact, frequently with other spies who are equally adept at separating their emotions to match the pandemonium. Meanwhile, the role of lone gunman touching down for moments of quiet between storms has never been less on the table for Jo. Her marriage is strong and her family life is happy, and she'd just found a replacement field operative in Cruz. But the suicide bomb at the border has only strengthened her resolve to play against the devil's aces as fast as they come. I'm hunting how to make peace with walking away, she tells Neil in the hospital, having just been told her torn artery will prove lethal if it tears again. But I have to find it, and you can't fucking guilt me, you can't reason me, and you can't love me into doing it. That last part is surely what stings most for Neil, who's just told his wife he won't survive it if she dies on the job. Apropos of her work-life priorities, she's even more straight with Byron later on when they're discussing the next phase of the mission, to show Iran and China that we aren't the only nation with an open border, as directed by Mullins. And they're going to do that by intercepting the 2 Chinese nuclear scientists at an Iranian air base. The Empire will strike back. Wouldn't you know it, the deck's been reshuffled to suit the skills of our Lioness. Their best covert option of illuminating the targets in Iran is by sending in a helicopter to strike close by, and Jo has the clearance to run the operation from the field. Byron isn't sure about letting Jo go to Iran, even if she promises not to set foot off the base, but he's swayed just enough when she lays out her real reason for being there. I can't walk away on a loss. Good news, folks. Jo's still with us. And then some. Just when it seemed our girl was staring down a permanent sunset, she's alive and literally kicking the shit out of hospital staff in a blind rage. Turns out the shrapnel in her side was a piece of her cell phone, lacerating an artery that could take her out again real quick if she doesn't take it easy for at least the next week. All I'll say is that the devil's showing faces, the doctor tells her. Think it through before you play your hand. Love when Sheridan gets a little cowboy lyric in via some side character you'll never see again. Anyway, Joe's response to this omen is about as cautious as you'd expect, and it bodes ill for the rest of the Lioness crew, who find themselves in a sinister game of international speed poker with no option but to play the cards you've got against the devil's aces. The season's penultimate episode opens with a heavy stew of a monologue from Mullins, who shows up at Byron's house for a quick rundown of the situation at hand, a little too conspicuously for the audience's sake, but it certainly helps in the season's final innings. As the situation stands, they think the suicide bomber at the border was a proxy at the behest of Chinese intelligence and served two purposes: 1, to continue destabilizing the border to influence the election, and 2, to shift U.S. intelligence focus stateside to obfuscate the two Chinese nuclear scientists stationed in Turkey, with plans to transport into Tehran soon. Mullins clears the runway for his monologue with the age-old question, "Where were you on the 9th of November?" Then he proceeds with a cross-section of spitting straight facts and spewing garbage anyone who watches this show will come to expect, regardless of political leanings. According to Mullins, George W. Bush, never named in the show, but essentially referenced as the 43rd president who kinda stole the election, answered America's call to rise as a true. Lioness Season 2, Episode 6, 2381 is the episode that brings the Paramount Plus show to a tipping point. It's the one that throws all the cards on the table, including another potential cast change. However, it's also the episode that most highlights the pacing issue that Season 2 has dealt with from the start. Is almost entirely focused on cleaning up the damage after the cliffhanger that ended Lioness Season 2, Episode 5, Shatter the Moon. People count their losses, yell at one another over who's responsible, and decide what to do next. There's a big reveal about DEA agent Gutierrez that keeps the tension level high, but mostly this episode feels like clearing the deck so that the series can do something with the last two installments of the season. The return of Cruz Manuelos has proven to be the best part of Lioness. Since her reappearance in Season 2, Episode 4, 500 Children, Cruz has been at the center of some of the most memorable scenes and helped to push the story arc forward in new and interesting ways. She's challenged Joe and been instrumental in helping her replacement Josie Carrillo. In Episode 6, Cruz intervenes when Josie's father Pablo Carrillo assaults her after learning why Josie is at his home. Her sweeping in and holding Pablo at gunpoint is a memorable moment not just for her, but in that it's the kicker of a sequence in which the whole team takes over the place. This very violent turn of events includes killing Pablo's security team and finding out that his maid Atsi is wearing a wire. Under pressure from two cups, Atsi reveals that she's working for Gutierrez. This is a not entirely unexpected plot twist that gives everyone something else to do. It does, however, stall the Carrillo storyline in its tracks. Episode 6 ends with Pablo and Josie just staring at one another from across a room. The whole momentum in this part of the story comes from Cruz taking charge, whether it's physically or giving Josie important advice. It's enough to make audiences wonder why Season 2 didn't just come up with some reason to keep Cruz as its lioness. The character may not have wanted to come back into the program, but she's certainly proving her value over again. And the same goes for actor Laisla de Oliveira, who slid right back in as if she never left. Shatter the Moon includes the long-awaited scene in which Josie makes contact with her family, not her uncle, but her mother and father. It's the part audiences have been thinking about since the Lioness Season 2 premiere, and the reason it works is Cruz being there. Her calming Josie down before they arrive and her reactions to what gets said at the dinner table are memorable moments that also remind audiences that it isn't easy or even fun to be a lioness. From the season premiere, the character of Jo has been incredibly aggressive in knowing what she wants and expecting to get it, without much care for anyone else's situation or their feelings. The scenes involving Jo's children and her husband Neil have been the only ones to prove that Jo is capable of warmth and compassion. In Season 2, Episode 5, that changes because Jo is one of the people most affected by seeing the endangered children. Zoe Saldana has a great scene in which Jo, struggling with a few tears, calls back to CIA headquarters and argues that they should be allowed to rescue the kids. This prompts a brief, but intense argument with her boss. It's really nice to see the vulnerable side of Jo make its way into the military side of Lioness Season 2's narrative, because it gives Saldana more to do than yell at people and dish out orders, although she does her biggest amount of yelling yet at the beginning of the episode when Jo is enraged about what's just happened. But from a character standpoint, it makes her far more interesting. There have been times where she's been frustrating to watch, particularly in the premiere and in Season 2, Episode 3, Along Came a Spider. This is a show who has more to offer plot-wise. Joe's scenes with Cruz are especially fun because the two interact with one another as colleagues, no longer in a boss-employee relationship. It's Cruz who comes up with the idea of offering Jose's father a deal and gets Zoe on board with doing so, although based on Jose's reaction to the slurs he utters during his dinner table monologue, she may no longer think her father is worth saving. But that's Cruz's idea, and she has some good advice for both Josie and Joe. And Joe's willingness to listen to her is that more human side of the character. For a show with plenty of military drama, Lioness has been fairly slow-paced. Just as in Episode 4, there's more screen time devoted to the planning and discussion around a mission than the actual execution. It's not until the final 10 minutes or so of Shatter the Moon that fans are finally able to see the rescue operation that's been talked about the whole time. Fans of military TV shows will find this boring, particularly since the need for the mission to be a night strike also means that the audience can't see anything for periods of time. Viewers have to rely on what they can hear, and the regular cuts back to Tucker